This is the first of two evenings when we're premiering new work that's been created in the Samuel Beckett Research Centre here at the University of Reading. We decided 2 or 3 years ago to set up a Creative Fellowships programme out of the Research Centre when we received some funding from GML and Tim Osborne. We felt that it was important to create a living legacy at Reading around Beckett's work and particularly around the archive. So the remit, for those of you who are unfamiliar with our fellowship programme, was very much that we invited artists and creators into the centre to look at the archival holdings. Reading has the largest Beckett archive in the world. We stood by and were very happy to navigate them through the archive, but really we wanted the artists to explore their own way through and consult with us as appropriate. And then the final part of their remit was that they would create a new piece of work out of their engagement with Beckett and with the Samuel Beckett Archive at Special Collections here. So I'm very honoured this evening to introduce, as I say, the first of these new works, a work by Robert McCrum. Tomorrow we're premiering a new string quartet by our composer in residence, Tim Parkinson. Robert McCrum was an editorial director at Faber and Faber Publishers from 1979 to 1989. He was then editor-in-chief there from 1990 to 96. He has worked as literary editor of The Observer for more than 10 years, and he was appointed associate editor in 2008 of The Observer. But more importantly, from our point of view, we're aware that Robert had a long history of engagement and passion for Beckett's work. Robert himself is the author of several novels, including Jubilee in 1994, and he's written various works of non-fiction, most personally, as you'll hear for this evening's piece, A Life of P.G. Wodehouse, which appeared in 2004. So this is going to be a kind of evening of several parts. Robert himself is going to introduce his new piece that he's created out of his time at Reading and in the Beckett Archive, which is a drama called Full Moon. We're then going to have, we're very privileged to have a staged reading of a part of Full Moon, and then at the end of the evening, Robert and I will have a Q&A thinking about this new creation, the new drama that he has made, and we'll open the whole thing up for a Q&A from you if anybody has any questions that they want to ask Robert about his thoughts on Beckett or this new drama. So I'm very happy to welcome Robert to say a few words about Full Moon, and then we'll move into the performance of the staged reading. Thank you very much.
This seems to be a little bit higher. I'll get this one slightly higher. Well, thank you all for coming. I've got an incredible sense of deja vu. I was here a year ago and the year seemed to have flashed past. And I sat in the front row watching Imam McBride, and here I am a year later with this evening. And it's wonderful that so many of you, but all kinds of people have contributed to my year, and some of you here tonight, and some of you also participated in some of the things that we did. So thanks to you, and thank you, Reading. Not since I was enduring 2 weeks in Reading General Hospital aged 11 have I spent so much time here. And I've been wondering what to say about the old place. Its jail is part of our literary tradition. Its festival, a rite of passage for our kids. And what about your university? The Woodstock of the mind? The Alcatraz of academe? Well, not exactly. To me, in 2019, I must say, it's been the Abbey Road of the literary arts. I'm talking about the Beckett Foundation, of course. For me, it's been the thrill of a lifetime to have this association with the Beckett Foundation. When I was growing up, what mattered to me most, as much as Sam's writing, was the fact of him, his example as an artist. the austere humanity of his mature vision. Above all, his dedication to getting at the things that lie behind language. Yes, when I was 16, Beckett was my obsession. I even directed the schoolboy production of Endgame, Fin de Partie, playing Ham. At more than 2 hours, our fanatical devotion to every pause and comma and syllable was quite intolerable. If I tell you that I was at this time probably the only Maoist in Dorset, you will get the picture. Soon after this, I retired from my theatrical career to concentrate on A-levels. But now the wheel has come full circle, and we are here in the holy city of Irish literary studies. And after this enthralling year, my debt of gratitude to so many is of credit crunch proportions. The first of my thank yous must go to Conor Carville for his spontaneous invitation, appropriately in an Irish bar. To Stephen Matthews for so expertly mentoring my visit to the foundation. Stephen is also a fine poet, and I do hope there will soon be a lyrical dividend from these encounters with Beckett. Thanks too to all at the Museum of English Rural Life, especially Guy Baxter. Who could fail to become entranced with the vintage hay wains and antique pitchforks of Merle? A truly absurdist location. And thank you as well to my friend Will Davis, the bright hope of future Beckett studies. And also to Anna McMullen, who has kindly lent so much support to tonight's celebration. And to Jim, of course, our only begetter, Jim Nilsson, for his commitment and generosity in the midst of ill health. And we are so glad to have him with us tonight, an old master restored and on the mend. But most of all, thanks to the anonymous benefactor of this amazing programme, you will never know how much your sponsorship has set fire to my imagination. And finally, of course, to Edward Beckett, who gave his blessing to Beckett's Last Tapes, the Radio 4 documentary I made with Melissa Fitzgerald for Fitzmac Productions in August. Which brings me to tonight, an alarming mixture of a celebration and a reckoning. When I joined the Beckett Archive, my mission statement included promoting the work of the Foundation, hence our radio programme. I was also invited to come up with a creative response. Last year, Emil McBride's answer to this challenge was to write and perform an arresting kind of homage to Not I. A stunning monologue some of you will remember, but a daunting challenge for me. Honestly, I'm nowhere near even the baggage train or the camp followers of the avant-garde. So in the end, I decided to let Sam's archive work its magic. With so much access to some extraordinary treasures from an iconic life, I would indulge what the writer Adam Phillips calls our unofficial curiosity, the thing that animates our secret selves. For Phillips, unofficial curiosity is a psychotherapeutic concept. But for me, it's been a modus operandi at the Museum of Rural English Life. Official curiosity, writes Phillips, is obedient, but in our unofficial curiosity, we don't know who we want to be judged by. We get hooked, he says, on odd things, impressions, rhythms, words, the grain of madness that nourishes our covert creative minds. And the history of our curiosity, says Phillips, is the story of our lives. That story with which dramatists, from Sam to Shakespeare, enchant their audience. On many occasions this past year, Beckett has sent me back to Shakespeare, the Zen master of risk and originality. Endgame and Lear, Godot and Hamlet, there are so many reverberant echoes between past and present. Shakespeare's afterlife is now more than 400 years old. Beckett is still a beginner. It's just 30 years this Christmas since Sam's death. Like Shakespeare, his scattered works have been collected into a single edition, and now his artistic fate must rest with posterity. In that lottery, I bet two things. First, that the finest actors and directors will never cease to exercise their unofficial curiosity towards Sam's work, as they do with Shakespeare. Second, that Sam will become more and more secure as a 20th century giant. On stage, Shakespeare's endured many ages of reinterpretation that only confirm his greatness. Beckett, like Shakespeare, will always provoke arresting vindications and original reaffirmations. He's the kind of shapeshifter who inspires actors and directors. To some, he's first and foremost a playwright. Godot and Endgame, of course, helped define the theatre of the absurd. To others, he's a novelist. His great trilogy, Malloy, Malone Dies, and The Unnameable, marks the zenith of the Joycean experiment. To some, dare I say, a blind alley. But still, there are questions. Is Beckett the last modernist, or the first postmodernist? A great novelist, or a great playwright? He seems like a quintessentially Irish writer, born in Ireland and profoundly influenced by Joyce, yet he mostly wrote in French and risked his life with the French resistance. And his questions about the human condition remain a universal challenge. Home or exile, memory or oblivion, civilization or anarchy, master or slave. So is he an avant-gardist or an exile or what? One thing is certain. Beckett himself was never afraid to exercise his unofficial curiosity. His first play, Human Wishes, the text is here in the archive, puts Dr. Johnson, one of Sam's particular obsessions, on stage as Mrs. Thrale, enacting his mysterious private passion for the widow Hester. This tantalising fragment became a rich source of inspiration to me, as well as helping to resolve a Beckett conundrum that had troubled me for years. By what alchemy, I've often asked myself, does the author of What come to write Godot? What happened in those terrible years between the Nazi occupation and the Allied liberation of Paris? As I began to reflect on Sam's artistic renewal between 1940 and 1949, my thoughts drifted towards another mystery. Ever since my biography of the English comic master P.G. Plum Woodhouse, I've often wondered about a strange, intriguing episode in his wartime life, an eruption of tragedy into a life dedicated to sweetness and light, to staying on the surface, to not going down deep, in stark contrast to Sam. In August 1944, Woodhouse, then living in Paris, got caught up in a resistance gun battle. Astonished but unharmed, in the aftermath of this close shave, he complained to another writer in terms I've never forgotten. It's such a pity, he wrote, that experiences happen to the wrong people. I don't suppose I shall ever make anything of my life in Paris. Suddenly, out of nowhere, here was my answer to the creative challenge of the Beckett Fellowship. Two great writers, Sam and Plum, meeting by chance, in extremis, thrown together by the fates in an imaginary and quasi-absurd encounter, a short play about another play. Well, it's still a work in progress, but it does have a title, as you've heard, Full Moon, which some of you may recognise I've lifted from Woodhouse himself. Full Moon, inspired by the conjunction of Beckett, the sign of the avant-garde, and Woodhouse, the master of light comedy, is what we give you now. The first ever performance of the opening scene, starring, I'm delighted to say, two great actors, the two Davids, David Horowitz and David Threlfall, directed by a great director, my dear friend, Michael Hoffman. Thank you very much.
It's late summer in Paris, towards the end of the Second World War. Amongst many writers here, the nearly 40-year-old Samuel "Sam" Beckett is among the most obscure. He has just returned to his apartment, having served with the resistance in the Vaucluse, and is about to begin the frenzy of writing, the siege in the room, that will culminate in Waiting for Godot. Better known, even world famous, P.G. Plum Woodhouse, fleeing internment and disgrace in Nazi Germany, has taken up residence in the Hotel Bristol. He faces an uncertain future with a looming threat of capital punishment after his Berlin broadcasts. In August 1944, during the liberation, Woodhouse was taking his afternoon walk down the Champs-Élysées when he got caught up in a gun battle outside the Marigny Theatre and witnessed several civilian deaths. An innocent bystander, Woodhouse was miraculously unscathed. Beckett may or may not have been part of this drama. His whereabouts remain mysterious. Woodhouse wrote to an English friend, It's such a pity that experiences happen to the wrong people. I don't suppose I shall ever make anything of my life in Paris. Full Moon is inspired by these events.
Well, I mean, cool. My gosh.
Well now, aren't you the lucky man?
A close shave. Wow.
The closest of close shave.
And the narrowest of squeaks. You just saved my life. You saved my life.
Or that's nothing new, mister. A throw of the dice. In this lousy war, I've learned a lifetime of lessons about love and death.
Oh, me too. I'm sorry. One tries to practice the stiff upper lip, but sometimes
There are some things we can never sweep under the carpet.
And some dogs that will always bark.
Dogs, carpets, that's how it goes.
How does it go?
Agonies of waiting. Invaded by eruptions of dread.
Where are we?
Le Théâtre Marigny.
Are we safe?
Here, honestly, I have my doubts. See, if you're after wanting peace of mind, this might be the wrong address. You saw that poor girl.
It's too awful. Shot through the heart. She fell right next to me on the grass. And then, well, you were so brave. I think you have no fear.
Fear, sir, is a dangerous distraction in wartime.
I'm just a civilian caught in the crossfire, but oh, that bloodshed. I thought the shooting would never stop. Still, with a nice cup of tea...
May one inquire what brought you into this fracas?
I was walking down the Champs-Élysées, my postprandial habit. I had a dog, but she passed away. I still find the routine most awfully helpful to my mood.
What kind of dog?
A Pekingese named Wanda. I loved her dearly.
I'm more of a cat man myself.
Cats? Not dogs?
No, never the dog. The cat.
A nice cup of tea and a biscuit. Right now, that's what I really could do with.
A nice cup of tea and a biscuit.
A plain digestive biscuit.
Not your ginger nut.
A ginger nut? No, a plain digestive, please.
A plain digestive and... Oolong?
I beg your pardon?
What kind of tea? Oolong, lapsang souchong, Earl Grey?
Earl Grey, for me. What about you?
To be honest with you, sir, I'd be for Lipton's.
Not too hot, not too sweet, not too weak, not too strong, not too much milk, and please not a drop spilt in the saucer. That's how I like it.
How you like it, I see.
It's in the blood, you see. I grew up out east. My papa was serving there.
Serving out east? Would he be a military kind of man?
A colonial civil servant. He and my mamma...
Welcome to the liberation.
Oh, if only I could have traded mine for hers.
Of the girl on the grass?
I just escaped from 3 years as the guest of the German government and now reside in the Hotel Bristol.
That's a 5-star bolt hole, that is. What kind of a guest?
I was interred.
A political prisoner.
I prefer to think of it as a colossal misunderstanding. Forgive and forget, I say. No hard feelings, don't you know?
No feelings at all, it would seem. Does this war mean nothing to you?
Well, just now it means I can't go home.
Home? You still have the Hotel Bristol.
Is that such a crime?
Hotel Bristol has a very bad reputation.
Oh, you're telling me. I mean, the room service.
I was meaning war crimes.
In the Hotel Bristol? Surely not.
Has it escaped your notice that Paris has been under Nazi occupation these 4 long years?
Oh, yes, of course. I do hope you don't think of me as a collaborator.
Are you familiar with the Boy Scout movement known as the French Resistance?
Not as such, no.
So, what about you then?
What about me?
Well, the usual questions. How, when, where, and why. And if, as you don't say, you were mixed up with the Nazis, there'll still be some rather awkward questions.
I thought we'd just covered that. No hard feelings and all that.
Well, I'm going to need more and better particulars, mister. So I will.
Now what?
The existential silence.
Eh?
Throughout this lousy war, I've oftentimes asked myself, what is to be done?
Generally speaking, old boy, I'm rather inclined to look on the bright side. And now fate has thrown us together, I'd like to be friends.
Friends? I have no friends. Suzanne says we are all of us either dog or cat. Strange, but true.
Suzanne?
My French girl. Friends don't come easily, especially in wartime.
Don't I know it? I call it the stiff upper lip. I say to myself, live in the moment, Plum, from day to day.
Plum? As in pie?
Or jam. It's short for Pelham, actually. Pelham Grenville.
Ah. Pelham. Grenville.
Now and then, don't you know, there's some raw work pulled at the font.
Coordinate Sam. As in jam. Fate's existential jam.
Eh?
Jam yesterday, jam tomorrow, but never jam today, Mr.
Plum, please.
Delighted to meet you, Mr. Plum.
The luck is all mine. You just saved my life. Perhaps a modest celebration is in order. A smoke is just a smoke, but a good pipe is a friend indeed.
The mystery of the present moment.
Are you a poet?
Was I ever a poet? Now there's a question. A poor Irish writer of experimental prose fiction exercised with dubito ergo sum.
How extraordinary. I was raised on Latin and Greek.
Well now, a fellow who can tell an arist from a zoukma. But for what purpose?
Oh, well, you see, I'm a writer too. A jack of all trades, so to speak.
Jack of all trades indeed. Well, why not? And what kind of market might one inquire?
Oh, you know, the usual magazines. W.H. Smith, Broadway, Hollywood.
But you're not an American.
Oh, gosh, no. One loves America, but was raised in honkers. Hong Kong, you know, beneath the Union Jack.
Honkers. Are we perhaps not a British imperialist?
Do you know what, Sam? As a writer, like you, I've no appetite for labels. One prefers to spread sweetness and light. I'm sorry to put it like this, but I'm no more an imperialist than you are, excuse me, a Fenian agitator.
Jesus.
I'm so sorry, Sam. Lately, you see, I've had my fill of politics. Please, can't we look on the bright side? I mean, what are the odds of one writer saving another?
A chance in a million. One failure afflicting his fellow. Ever failed, fail again, fail better.
Cheer up, Sam. Aren't you glad to be alive?
I feel the war in my arms like a corpse.
My dear Sam, we must do our best to be cheerful.
Possibly go so far.
What's that?
It's a discreet personal aside. All right, it was nothing, a false alarm.
I'm such a coward, but...
All right, there's no need to scratch that scab, Mr. Plum. This war has left many wounds.
So, tell me, Sam, where do you stand?
Where do I stand?
On the big questions, the Almighty, the afterlife, the Last Judgment, and so forth.
On a good day, I doubt, therefore I am, will suffice.
I'm awfully sorry to bring God into things on such a brief acquaintance, but you know, after this terrible, he does rather come to mind.
After my war, I've no species of God in my mind. So, where do you stand?
Well, sometimes I do. You believe in him, I mean, but on other days, I don't.
Oh, I see, a committed agnostic.
You too?
I'm an atheist. Thank God.
Well, what now would you say are the chances of a quiet life?
Honestly, poor to negligible.
Just as one feared, and nothing to be done.
That's it. Rien à faire. Rien à faire. So why Paris?
Why not Paris?
I mean, what brought you here?
Why is everything in this damned war reduced to these interrogations? I'm sick of questions.
Where I come from, sir, a question is a politeness. A moment ago, you were telling me all about your dear papa.
He never understood me, you know.
Well, I'm always after thinking about my dad. I have things in here I could tell him
Things...
to break the heart of a stone.
Oh dear, forgive me, my dear fellow. I've been under quite a bit of strain lately. Perhaps when we know each other a bit better...
Ah, to be sure. Suspended revelations and that stiff upper lip.
Honestly, Sam, I'd rather live in my own world. Like most writers.
Do you publish under your own name, Mr. Plum?
Rather. Though it might have been better for me
If?
You see, one never used to think that having what people call a name was a problem. Just now, another identity might come in handy. When one was starting out, one sweated like the Dickens with pen names. Pelham Smythe, Bertram Brooke, Greville. Well, now one is just...
P.G. Wodehouse.
Oh, you guessed, of course. Plum to friends and family.
Of course one reads those advertisements in the Times Literary Supplement. P.G. Wodehouse, England's comic master.
I expect you think I'm horribly overpraised.
Well, sorry, Mr. Plum, but I really have no opinion.
No opinion? On our brief acquaintance, that doesn't sound like you, Sam. No opinion?
Well, mea culpa and whatnot. I've never read a word you've written.
Well, I must confess I've not read a word you've written either. I'm awfully sorry, Sam. I've really no appetite for avant-garde fiction. Not my thing. Sorry, Sam. I'm a nobody.
A nobody who was guest of the Nazis.
A humorist who made an ass of himself and who got on the wrong side of history.
Handcuffed to history, we must suffer the torments of existence.
P.G. Wodehouse, the international pariah?
What's that?
Oh, The lone tree. Your mise en scène.
Well, what for? Molière, Voltaire, Feydeau?
Well, just now, Sam, let's say it's our little drama.
Not a farce. Another illusion shattered.
Nothing wrong with illusions, Sam. Honestly, I'm happiest in my own world, where at least one knows the score.
What score would that be?
The jester whose last joke fell flat. I was hoping for a passage to New York, a quick exit to a safe house.
Well, we Irish are well versed in the temptings of the New World. Once these damned hostilities are over, I will return to the life of the exile.
Where's that?
Oh, I burrow in the 15th.
Does Ireland not call you home?
The banshee shrieks of Dublin, Mr. Plum, are precisely what I came here to evade.
A fellow escape artist? So, excuse me, Sam, tell me, who are you?
Samuel Beckett, at your service, Mr. Wodehouse.
Actually, Mr. Beckett, if I may advise, it's Woodhouse. Woad is medieval English for mad.
Madhouse. Yeah, I see. We're all born mad. Some remain so.
Tell me about your latest work.
There's a fine accumulation of prose droppings, Mr. Plum. But I don't know what I wanted, and I really don't know what I thought. I must have imagined so many things without knowing exactly what.
It is a novel, I take it, however experimental.
Murphy, published at 7 and 6 by G. Routledge and Company, a mystery to most of my readers.
Well, I love detective stories.
It's an existential mystery, if you like.
Yeah, I confess I'm not much of a lad for the existential.
The tale of a seedy solipsist set amongst work-shy drifters. Precisely what no one wants to read.
But I must confess, Sam, that I adore Agatha Christie.
Oh, now there's a writer. Murder on the Orient Express, genius.
I read her every day. Don't you love a plot? Her latest is a corker. The Moving Finger, Miss Marple on top form. When Bunny's finished with it, I'll be glad to lend it you.
Bunny.
My dear wife, who loves a mystery too. She'll want to read your novel too.
Oh, no. Murphy, spurned by many jackal publishers, was finally published in 1938. A world-class failure.
Reviews?
Fair to middling. Rarely indeed have I been so entertained by a book, so tempted to hyperboles of praise, Miss Kate O'Brien in The Spectator.
Oh, I say, Sam, that's awfully good. Must have bucked up sales, what? We all need bums on seats.
Such sedentary bums are strangers to G. Routledge and his company. These bookish gentlemen have been, pardon the pun, egregiously spineless about Murphy.
Eh?
Just 700 copies sold to the general public past the circulating libraries beyond the seas.
Getting known.
Once the war came, Murphy was out of print. A rare bargain for your ardent bibliophile.
Oh, that's too bad. Well, can't I help? My friend George Orwell has connections in London.
Well, so do I, Mr. Plum. Good connections, the very best. Many a free French cell was run from London. No, I do not repine. Not I. Working from a treasured typescript, I've spent this emergency translating Murphy into French.
After Murphy, what?
That's right.
What?
What?
What's right?
That's right. My what? How on earth did you know?
What?
About what?
What?
My title, my novel.
Your novel? Well, that's avant-garde if you like.
What is my protagonist?
What?
No, Mr. Plum. I think you mean who?
Who?
What is my hero? My man? W-A-T-T.
Oh, what? Thank you. What? What's it about?
What? What? It's a novel about what? What journey? I wrote it in Roussillon, waiting for this hateful war to end. Some of it's barely in English, to be frank. It was just an exercise. No symbols were not intended. I don't think it's for you.
Probably not.
When it comes to books and fate, Mr. Plum, I stand at a crossroads. I'll be 40 next year.
Time to be putting some runs on the board. Not French cricket, of course. The noble trial of bat and ball, recognised by Wisden. Don't you love Wisden?
I was in it once.
You? How can you speak of failure if you're in Wisden?
Well, Wisden tells the tale of sporting disaster as well as its triumphs.
Wisden is my Bible. Oh, come on, my dear fellow. Spill the beans. Give me your how, when, where, and why.
In the summer of 26, I played away with the Trinity team in England's Northern Shires. S.B. Beckett, top scorer, 18.
Oh, I say.
Our victory over Northampton was a rare highlight.
Northant's a useful side. Cricket is the damnedest game.
One perseveres in what one knows. We all need a good innings. The romance of Willow.
I wanted to be an all-rounder, but I never had the eyesight. Bowling was my forte.
The joy of the tumbling wicket. Line and length, that's me. Steady, medium pace.
My top score, 7 for 13. Plus a hat-trick.
Well, there's no disputing a hat-trick. 7 for 13. Some swing on the ball there.
Oh, yes, that was something to write home about.
Did you?
Did I what?
Did you write to your dear papa?
I don't remember. I'm almost 64. My world has been shot to pieces. But you have it all before you. I'm just a has-been.
A has-been who sells books.
A few thousand here and there. That's my problem. I'm the prisoner of a genre.
How many thousand?
When the war broke out, my latest had sold about 25,000 copies.
Your latest?
Uncle Fred in the Springtime.
A farce. 25,000 copies.
You are stunned at the injustice of this, Sam.
1940 was a terrible year.
Oh, but it was. My fate turned when France fell.
Suzanne and I were fleeing for our lives.
Oh, I wish we too had gone.
We,
Bunny, me, and our Pekingese.
family in flight is a terrible thing.
If only we'd got out.
On that last train from Paris,
My car broke down. There were fighter planes overhead.
I was never so desperate,
so frightened.
so alone.
Overnight, the German army marched in. I should have escaped by boat.
By boat?
We could have sailed from the Touquet, but I was too busy finishing my new novel, Joy in the Morning.
Now, where's the joy in that shenanigan?
Psalm 30, Joy cometh in the morning, my old pick-me-up.
It's a dark time, to be sure. Joyce was into his end game.
Joyce,
As I was his friend and assistant.
you were his
Occasionally, I confess, there was some dictation.
dictation? How extraordinary.
Well, shameful work, of course, but he had my sympathy and even my admiration.
Admiration for William Joyce?
For James Joyce, the author of Ulysses.
Oh, my gosh, I meant Lord Haw-Haw, the Irish traitor.
Mr. Joyce was my patron and friend, the greatest writer alive,
Oh,
until his passing.
may he rest in peace. I do apologize, Sam. Internment, you know, rather puts one out of circulation.
Interment.
1941.
You know, gave me better answers, he'd have my sympathy. 1941, the end of the end game. Mr. Joyce was the mentor of my exile and my first voice, my devotion.
I start as an enemy alien. My terrible war.
All our wars are terrible. How would yours be?
The worst years of my life.
Was you the writer? Tell me a story.
Rounded up by the Germans, cattle trucks across Europe, ghastly prisons, worse than school. Finally, this internment camp, a converted loony bin in Upper Silesia,
Upper Silesia?
southwest Poland.
I know all about Upper Silesia.
Beet fields and icy winds. If that was Upper Silesia, God knows what Lower Silesia must have been like.
I remember you on the wireless, on the BBC.
Oh, you must know the BBC. I was tricked, of course. Isn't fate the damnedest thing?
Well, now it would seem you've got a new life.
No. Sometimes even this life is beyond my control. William Joyce, the traitor. Yes, he, Lord Haw-Haw, hangs over me like the sword of Damocles.
Germany calling! Germany calling!
Don't! Joyce was a career broadcaster. I'm just an arse who made an arse of himself. My Joyce, I fear, will be tried for treason. His fate is in the hands of the Daily Mail.
Oh, those newspapers are the very devil, I'm telling you.
Rumours, slanders and death threats. You don't know the half of it. Fate's stuffed eelskin. Shakespeare's right. The worst is not so long as we can say this is the worst.
Westward ho! We must learn to fail better and to hold the stage.
For the troubled self, there's nothing like a new scene
Silence,
or a new script.
exile and cunning.
Eh?
That's my choice. I will not serve that in which I no longer believe, and I will try to express myself in some mode of life or art as freely as I can and as wholly as I can, using for my defense the only arms I allow myself to use: silence, exile, and cunning.
Silence, exile, and cunning. That's awfully good.
It's Mr. Joyce from the portrait, you see.
The portrait?
The portrait of the artist as a young man.
Ah, of course.
One's last exit is always another entrance. It's knowing the difference makes the difference.
Do you?
Are you on the way in or on the way out? Yeah, that's my question.
Personally, I'm in severe need of a good exit that's not at the end of a rope.
Sometimes I dream of the noose.
British justice is my nightmare. I'll have the interrogation, then I'll wait for the verdict, like a batsman before the umpire's long finger. If Lord Haw-Haw goes down, it's back to the pavilion for me too. They're sending a man, a military man, a major. I expect he'll ask a lot of questions, like you. Before the war, this fellow was a journalist.
A journalist?
Yeah, I rather like newspaper men. Someone has to do it.
When I think of the press, I'm as depressed as a cabbage with slugs.
After those broadcasts, I became another Haw-Haw. Sean O'Casey called me a performing flea, damn it.
The cheek of that! Egypt!
Egypt is too much, but thank you, Sam. Nincompoop, perhaps.
Was it
Twit,
numpty?
numbskull, dimwit, twerp.
Blank, gower, dope, pillock,
Producer,
publisher?
broadcaster. Umpire! Oh, I say, Sam, that's not cricket. Ah, cricket. Turning wickets and a swinging ball. Those long summer afternoons, tea in the pavilion, and the girl on the swing. She was your age, Sam. Not yet 42. My daughter, Leonora. Tell me about her. When I think of her now, none of this has much meaning. And I thought she was mine forever. The Heart of a Goof was for her.
The Heart of a Goof.
Oh, a collection of golfing stories dedicated to my darling Leonora, without whose sympathy and encouragement this book would have been finished in half the time. She was a teenager then. At that age you think you're immortal. She'd bounce into my study. "Hello, Plummy," she'd say. "How's tricks?" and sit on my desk. "How's tricks?" I guess she thought this was what Bertie Wooster would say. "How's tricks?" That laughing smile and those big grey eyes. "How's tricks, Plummy?" Too young to die. All I have now is her memory. And I thought she was immortal. I loved her, you see, Sam, more than anyone I've ever known.
Perhaps you're right.
Was it?
The gods are against us after all.
High stakes on all sides. If my government decides to hang William Joyce, I'll be on a very sticky wicket.
Or even the British couldn't hang a fellow for a broadcast.
My dear fellow, never confuse the impossible with the improbable.
Oh, the British are beyond me, Mr. Plum. And yet you're one of them.
I know I failed. I just don't know when or why. How I wish I'd learnt to hate the Germans.
The resistance gave my life meaning, even with its inevitable losses.
What losses?
Friends, neighbours. There was a price.
Well, of course, you were a hero. I should have realised.
It's easier to be a hero as a failure, Mr. Plum. Your tragedy is something else.
I'm rather hoping it's not a tragedy.
Fate, Mr. Plum. Life itself and nothing but.
Life or death. Sometimes when I wake in the morning, I say to myself, did I dream these last 4 years? And then it all comes back, no, it's not a dream, it was all my doing. A loony thing to do, of course. And now I can't even find the song to explain it. Oh, you know that Broadway number, "The Land Where the Good Songs Go." I really have no ear for music, but I can say things in song I'll never express in prose. If I were more of an artist, Sam, perhaps my plight would be easier for you.
Actually, it's your indifference I'm admiring.
Oh, really? In my imagination, the world is a sort of loony bin.
My world's become a wasteland.
My loony bin was once a paradise until...
My paradise is an ash heap. Laughter and forgetting, Mr. Plum, are now the only consolation.
Gilbert and Sullivan.
Oh, Patience is my favourite. That wild one, you know.
Oh, Patience, wild at heart, eh? Tragically, I can't sing.
If you're anxious for to shine in the high aesthetic line as a man of culture rare, you must get up all the germs of the transcendental germs and plant them everywhere. And everyone will say, as you walk your mystic way,
I love Wilde.
Love Wilde. When I was growing up in Dublin, people still talked about him. You know, the Wilde family home is on Merrion Square, hard by Clare Street. And at the end of Clare Street is the hotel where Joyce met his future wife. Story he loved to repeat. So I'll be going to Dublin soon via London. Yes, a rendezvous with my vocation.
Go on.
Well, I once took lodgings on Clare Street. In my attic, I would stare at the blank sheet of paper that advertised my struggle with that first novel.
Murphy.
Even then, I was halfway between Wilde and Joyce.
Between.
Culture and anarchy.
And are you still divided?
Well, unlike you, I have not yet made the necessary reconciliation of that dichotomy. In me, there's always been two fools. One asking to stay, and the other imagining a life less horrible further on.
I must confess, Sam, that this fool must take refuge in his art. It's all I have now.
All you have now, Mr. Plum, are your words and what lies beyond. And all you can do, sir, is place yourself at the mercy of history.
Thank you, Mr. Beckett. Well then, Sam, let's make a move. The first step on my road to redemption.
For once, Mr. Plum, that's not such a bad exit. Shall we?
Arrange things a bit.
The two chairs.
Yeah, you do. Okay, thank you. That was a brilliant performance, and I'd like to thank David Horowitz and David Threlfall for putting that together. Please come out from behind the... I'd also very much like to thank Michael Hoffman, who directed the play, and particularly to thank our technicians. Actually, we dashed through the whole kind of tech and rehearsal process literally in about 3 hours this afternoon, and I think, Mike, everything worked pretty perfectly, didn't it, in the end? Yeah, it was kind of miraculous. So thank you very much to everyone. If we have just 10 or so minutes of questions, conversations, I suppose the obvious one is that we were left on a bit of a cliffhanger, weren't we? We went through the first scene of the play. Can you tell us, Robert, a bit about what happens later?
It doesn't. Arthur Miller says somewhere that plays are about the chickens coming home to roost, and the chickens do come home to roost in this. And that's the first scene. There are 3 more scenes. There are 2 in the first half, and there's a pause, and there's 2 more, so 4 in total. And at the end of it, Woodhouse goes to America, and Sam writes Godot.
Okay. Right. Does that simply happen, or is there?
No, I mean, that you're left with Sam being liberated to write Godot.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
But I mean, we have a whole script. We're working on this bit by bit.
Great.
It is a very, very difficult thing to do, writing a play. It is very difficult.
Can I ask you then why you chose to write a play
Well,
out of the fellowship?
Because he's had him in it. That's why.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do, and I thought I had to do something which I could relate to. And I found writing the parts of Plum and Sam very, very enjoyable. Plum is somebody I know well from doing the biography, and Sam is somebody I've read a lot. And in the course of the year, I did this radio program with Melissa Fitzgerald, and so I got to hear the ghostly voice of Sam on various recordings. We sold the program to the BBC on the ground that this would be the unheard Samuel Beckett, virtually inaudible. It was a good program, I think. And it was promoting the archive.
So partly coming to the archive and
So
hearing Beckett's voice for the first time. Yeah.
2 things that are interwoven. It's been, thanks to you and your colleagues, it's been an extraordinary year. I found it absolutely thrilling.
Thank you.
I think the biggest thrill was to hold the manuscript of Human Wishes, the play, very heavily annotated. And then possibly a slightly bigger thrill is to hold the notebooks in which you wrote Murphy. You can still see the beginning of Murphy.
Do you think that your opinion of Beckett or your attitude toward Beckett changed through being at the archive and talking to some of us and looking at some of our work? And
I think I got to know through talking to people who knew him. We have this iconic image of him taken on this. In fact, by one of my former colleagues on the Observer, Jane Bauer, who had a minute to photograph him outside the Royal Court, and that iconic, which you've all seen, that very austere, bleak, almost cadaverous face.
Yes.
Frozen in that moment by Jane. But then you discover that he was a regular visitor to London, had loads of friends in the theatre, was very convivial, and played the piano, he was a good pianist, have a drink, chat. So that was something which I hadn't really known about.
So you got a sense of a more human
kind
of figure, as it were.
I think what he did, what a lot of great writers, not including Shakespeare, who's mysterious, but Ben Jonson did it, Sam Johnson did it, which is to create a persona, and I think Beckett created a persona for himself.
Yes.
Either consciously or unconsciously, but the Beckett persona emerges during, over a long period of time, then dramatically after the success of Godot.
Yes.
As a way of protecting his privacy and his personal life.
So you felt that the archive really opened
No, the
up
archive was.
kind of,
Those of you who have not been, if you have the opportunity to go into it, it's well worth a visit. It's got some extraordinary things. He wrote in French, as we were saying, and so there's a very big holding of French manuscripts in France, in the Bibliothèque Nationale. And then, of course, there's a big collection of Beckett material in America, of course. But this is the centre of Beckett manuscript holding.
yes. And it's interesting then that you weave into your drama so many quotations, as it were, from both Beckett and from Woodhouse, that somehow getting the voice right is actually
I think
about.
sometimes listening to it now, I was thinking that works, that doesn't. There were some which work better than others. And Mike and the actors and I've been winnowing out. It's been a great experience just to go through, just combing through the script, clearing away a lot of sort of debris from research to try and get to something that's slightly purer.
Because I felt that maybe the net result is what you're pointing to, is that it's not just that the war, as it were, led to a kind of particular trauma in both of their lives that made them into different kinds of writer, but actually that the war gave them almost a kind of vocabulary and a kind of set of phrases that they could then redeploy.
I think that's true for Sam. I think Woodhouse, the war wrecked him. His world, he said, my world, I've used the line,
Yes.
my world has been shot to pieces. And he never really recovered.
Right.
He never recovered in the broadcast. He went back to America, and I think he spent the rest of his life. He never understood what his offence had been. He knew he'd offended.
Right.
And letting the side down was something he found very painful as a true Englishman. Great plan.
Yes.
But all the things that I loved doing was discovering all these, what you might call adventitious connections between the two of them. They both love electricity. They both love cricket. One could go on. Music.
Yes. Yeah.
So on and so forth. And yet the contrast, I mean, as I think these two Davids brilliantly portrayed, they're very different people.
Yeah.
I mean, they couldn't be more different.
I think what the two Davids bring out as well is that we have the very English Woodhouse and we have the Irish Beckett. What were you trying to get at, do you think, by dramatising that tension, and perhaps at this particular kind of moment as well, to do that? Yeah.
But I think, when your one's very conscious that here we are in Reading, in the home of, as it were, one of the homes of Oscar Wilde, and the English literature, if we think of Swift and Sheridan and Wilde, the English literature, Joyce, the English literature tradition is the Irish literature tradition. And as the play develops, I play around with that more, but not kind of stridently, but just trying to explore what is going on when we talk about English literature, which is actually Irish.
Right, okay. So it's a play about the conversation between...
and the porousness of these two traditions, and how they are intimately woven together, and in a very important way.
Right.
And I mean, Sam himself, he's a Protestant Irishman, raised in middle-class Dublin. He wasn't by any means he hadn't risen out of the bog. But, in fact, went to the same school as Wilde.
Yes, he did, didn't he? Royal. Yes.
And has many, many sympathies and similarities with Wilde.
He does, and was very aware of him all
was
the
very,
time.
very aware. And so the idea, one of the ideas of the play is to suggest it's moving from... Joyce was clearly... He says on many occasions he couldn't go on in the Joycean path.
Yes.
And one of the reasons he adopted French was so that he could liberate himself from language. He felt tyrannized by Joyce's language, brilliance of language.
Absolutely.
Couldn't shake it off. And so French was a way of getting away from that.
Yeah.
And so the play is partly about that, but it's also our hope, if we can get it right, an emotional narrative about this relationship with these two. I mean, they're both in their way giants of light comedy and whatever Beckett stands for, which is pretty much everything else.
I think it's very striking, isn't it, that the brilliance of what you've done is to bring two biographies together, as it were.
And I should here pay tribute to Jim's biography, which is, if I could show Jim my copy of his cover, the scrawls and comments, underlinings and appropriations. So I pay tribute to Jim for his biography. And yes, these two, my biography of Woodhouse and his of Beckett's, are ones which I've studied closely.
I was wondering about what that says in a way about Beckett in your own life. Could you? I mean, you talked a bit about
well, there was a period
the kind of school time, but I mean, Endgame, for instance, comes in as part of the subtitle of your book about your stroke every third thought, doesn't it? And it's almost as though Beckett, as it were, you talked about the emotional kind of development within the play, but is there a kind of emotional hold?
Yes. I have only one regret from my time at Faber and Faber. Literally, this is absolutely true. I have only one serious regret, and it is that when I first started there was a man called Charles Monteith, who was the chairman, and who'd appointed me. I think he was desperate. He wanted someone to take over, and I was his, the previous occupant in my job had gone mad, literally, and he appointed me to solve the problem. And after a bit of toing and froing, we got started. And he discovered that I loved Beckett because Faber's published all Beckett's play. And I said, I'm a great fan. He said, would you like to go to Paris to meet Sam? I was about 26. And I thought, he wouldn't possibly want to meet me. And so I said, and Charles said, oh, just go to Paris, get on the train, go to the cafe where he goes every day, and sit down and talk to him. I thought, why on earth would he want to meet me? And he's too great. So I said no. Charles had actually written the letter to Sam saying, he's coming over. I'd like to meet my young colleague. And I said, I cannot do this. So I refused. And I think I still would refuse because I was held in so much respect and awe. The idea of little me meeting this giant is just embarrassing.
What is it about his work? Finally we can open it. What is it about his work, do you think, that really grabbed you both as a very young schoolboy and now?
It's his perfect pitch. Every sentence, every phrase is perfectly pitched. It is very funny. It is absolutely brilliant. It's both dumb and hard, and also highly entertaining.
Right.
And it's less is more. It's so spare. It's really powerful from a writing point of view. It's like a model. And it has its own music. I mean, Beckett, when it's done properly, often isn't, but when it's done well, it has a music which is wonderful.
And who introduced you to Beckett?
Well,
you said at school, but was it the school teacher?
We're talking about this with David Threlfall and David Horowitz on Monday. These school trips you go on, and they can change your life. I mean, I had a great English teacher who actually didn't introduce me to Beckett, but he did take us on a school trip.
Right. Wow.
And we went from Sherborne, where I grew up as a teenager, to the Northcote Theatre, Exeter. And there was a production by production of Waiting for Godot, with two young actors, and who they were, and it completely, I was blown away. I remember sitting, when it was all over, just sitting there, sort of in a trance, could hardly move, it was so extraordinary.
Wow.
So it was like a moment. And I was about, 50.
Yeah.
And then we did this excruciating production of Endgame, but I directed and starred in it. They went on and on and on. The school came and they all walked out. But that was also a rite of passage. It wasn't just Endgame, by the way, it was also Crap's Last Day as well.
The same evening.
Same evening, yeah, we did Crap's Last Day. Then we had a break, and then we did the whole of Endgame.
Righty.
On and on.
Right.
And I can remember it now, 'cause I still blush with embarrassment at the prospect of it. So all this is me. This is my sort of literary education, I suppose. So this, I can't tell you, Stephen, this year has been so great.
Thank you.
And you've
It's
been marvellous.
Well, it's been lovely working with you.
You're absolutely
been
marvellous.
real.
And I want to thank the
Such
two
fun.
Davids, the great Davids, and the great Mike, who's seen there.
Yes.
Who I mean, we did all this stuff on paper, and you saw it emerging.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what we were doing. I had no idea. I could hear it in my head.
Yes.
And then
We
they
talked about it.
and then they would. We talked about it a lot. And now it's come to life.
Yeah.
And it's been wonderful to see that. So thank you very much indeed. And thank you all for coming. Thank you very much indeed.
Do you have any questions, anyone? Before we leave, anybody want to ask Robert a question about what you've seen tonight and heard tonight? Any thoughts about it? Jim.
Excuse my voice, I'm sorry. Very quickly, Robert, could you tell us why I love the chapters in your biography? When you spoke about it, gee, I better shut up. When you speak about his broadcasts, did you feel that were you aware, I haven't read the script, were you aware of his attitude? I mean, was he conscious while he was doing them of what he was doing?
No. That's
Was this totally unconscious?
I think that I've got two answers to that. I have two answers. One, I urge, if this is of any interest, and it was at one point a source of great contention in the Woodhouse family and amongst Woodhouse fans. but much less so now. But if you're interested in this subject, read George Orwell's essay In Defence of PG. It's by far the best thing ever written on the subject. And he explains unequivocally how detached Woodhouse was, and we were talking about this afternoon, how almost autistic he was. He lived in his own imaginary world. He had no idea what he was doing. He was also conned, and he blundered into this disaster. There's a long explanation which I won't bore you with. There is, however, another side to this, which we also talked about today, which is that after he had been disgraced in Berlin, in the British press particularly, and in America and around the world, but particularly in Britain and America, he stayed in Germany. He stayed in Nazi Germany. He stayed in the country house in Nazi Germany. He did not leave. And then he came to Paris, and he was trying to get across from Paris to New York. But there was no attempt at atonement, or no attempt at coming to terms with what he'd done. And I always felt that actually the broadcasts were, in a way, the least of it. And I felt that his offence, to history, so to speak, to the horrors of Nazism, was not to recognise, because as Orwell says, he was innocent. He wasn't naive. People say he must be very naive. Well, maybe he was naive, but in every other part of his life, he was exceedingly bright and very sharp. So it's a very complicated story. But he was somebody, as I say in the script, he was caught on the wrong side of history, didn't understand what Nazism amounted to. Was a child of, in a way, Edwardian England in the First World War, and saw the crisis in the First World War to great power terms. The moral dimension, the moral horror of Nazism, he just didn't get it. He was the jester whose joke fell flat, as I said in the script. It's a terrible tragedy, and I think, to me, it makes him more interesting as a human being. I think, and one of the other things I want to try and get across in the play, if I can, is the humanity of Beckett, which I said in my opening remarks. He's got this sort of stale humanity. And Woodhouse has a kind of humanity as well. But it's not one which, it seems very remote now, in 2019, 2020.
And it's intriguingly more complex in some senses.
It's a lot more complex.
Yeah.
But I think they're both really interesting figures. Both very, very, very secluded, well protected. They both lived in. Beckett clearly lived in his own imaginary space. And I mean, if anyone wants to ask the question, did they meet? Well, they could have met, but they didn't. But if they had met, I think they would have talked about cricket. There's a very good story of Woodhouse met Orwell in Paris at the same time, and Orwell invited him out to lunch. And so there's a lot of interest in what these two great English literary greats talked about. So how they do it, like Shakespeare and Milton. And Woodhouse said, no, we didn't talk about literature, we talked about the respective performance of our school teams. And so Orwell said, isn't it interesting that Eton beat Tunbridge? And then Woodhouse would say, well, Tunbridge lost to Dulwich and Dulwich beat Eton. What do you make of that? And they had this very intense discussion about the performance of their school teams.
As Beckett did with Pinter, presumably, in the kind of, We've probably got time for one more quick question, if anyone has one. Yes. Hi, yes.
Robert, what's going to happen next with the play? Like more plans for it?
By the way, this is Melissa, with whom I collaborated on the radio, who was the genius behind our programme. What's going to happen next? Well, we want to do a full reading of the whole thing. We need to do a bit more work, but we need two Davids, and Mike and I have to work out. I'm going to do that, I hope soon. And then we'll see. I mean, it's a long road, and I think each step I find very interesting and quite demanding and exhilarating and strange. But I couldn't make any predictions, but I think that's what we're going to do. Try and get a bunch of people to listen to do a table reading of the whole thing. it's too long at the moment, and I think it's too slow. My criticism, I think it just needs to speed up a bit in narrative terms, because I know what's coming. And there's starts in 44, the next scene takes place in 45, the third scene is in 46, and the final scene is 47. And I think there's a lot to get through. But it should be, it should be 2 acts. An hour and 3/4, under 2 hours. It should be a short play.
I really hope that happens. I mean, I think it's a very good thing. Please come back tomorrow evening to hear Tim Parkinson's String Quartet, which we're premiering after this wonderful premiere this evening. Thank you to everyone who's been involved in making this the event it has been, and thank you very much to Robert for the Q&A afterwards.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.